Hey, hello everybody, and welcome to Tech's Potential. I'm Paul Soul, CEO of the Florida High Tech Corridor. This is episode number 9 of the podcast that we do, and it's really a chance to be able to meet very interesting people across the state of Florida. We talk to innovators, we talk to technologists, and individuals that are really kind of unleashing not only their own potential, but the potential of others. This one, as we launch it in October, is a chance to celebrate National Women's Small Business Month. And I can't think of a better guest than the lady that just smiled at you, Kathryn Rudloff. Kathryn is going to describe the organization called weVENTURE, Women's Business Center at FIT. Where we got connected is really almost a year ago with an SBA grant called Catalyst, where we were able to take some money and plow it back into ecosystem builders and those that are helping businesses like Kathryn. And I think that's what I love about the corridor, Kathryn, more than anything else, is to meet the people that are out there really doing this. So, and I often will start a podcast with perhaps a little personal anecdote. And that is, I have a niece that goes to Wisconsin. There was an interesting oof is right. So there's a reason The Ohio State University is number 3 this week. That was not the best game in the world for Wisconsin, but that is okay, because I know you have some home roots there at The Ohio State University. So thank you, Kathryn, for joining us this morning. Talk to us tell me a little about yourself.
I love that you brought it up, because as a Buckeye in Florida, I feel like I'm always the Buckeye that locals, they really don't like us. And I moved here right around when Florida played Ohio State football, basketball back to back, and Florida beat us in all of those. And I still wore my Ohio State all the time. I was on the dance team. Like I bleed school spirit.
Awesome.
And so I'm always the Buckeye that everybody knows and likes to call out in the group.
Tell us a little bit about you, kind of not only what you do there at weVENTURE, but also take us back a little bit in your own sort of experience and what got you to where you are today.
Sure. So I am the executive director of weVENTURE Women's Business Center over at Florida Tech in Melbourne, South Brevard County, still Central Florida, but on the Space Coast, as we like to call it. And my background, kind of how I got to here at Ohio State, at The Ohio State University. I have an undergraduate in political science, and I moved to Washington. I have a master's degree in political management, and I worked on the Hill in leadership offices doing political communications and a lot of campaign work for about 4.5, 5 years. And then I went out and I actually did campaigns. I had the bug for campaign work. And so I've worked campaigns at every level, local, state, the statewide district director for a 2007 campaign. But the gentleman that I met in Washington happened to be from this area. And he is a serial entrepreneur. He had his first business when he was, in junior high as an early bulletin board, early ISP provider to the local network, like way back in the early days of the internet. And he had a company then that was taking off with an old college roommate from UCF. And so he wanted to move back to Florida. So I kind of came, and this was ripe for political excitement here. And it worked out for a number of years. But after a while, I transitioned out of the campaign lifestyle and into more business advocacy, and started working with small business organizations and groups to help them become more politically active. And then that got me more on the small business, really advocacy work that led me to weVENTURE now as the executive director. And in this role, my primary objective is that community outreach, to work within the community to bring in not just clients that we can help and support, but also mentors and investors that can work with our businesses to help them grow to that next level. And then I love to do outreach and stuff like this at a larger scale outside of our, Space Coast region, to advocate on behalf of women-owned businesses and really the changing economy that's happening, and the role that women are playing in the economy.
Yeah, so thank you for that. I got a number of questions and thoughts. So describe a little bit, because you're somewhat connected with Florida Institute of Technology. Describe for our viewers what that connection is.
Sure. So the Women's Business Center program is actually funded by the U.S. Small Business Administration. So most people are probably familiar with the SBDCs, Small Business Development Centers. That is a program that's actually, the funding is given to the state, and the state matches those federal dollars, and then they put those SBDCs out within the state university system, college system. The Women's Business Center grant is about 15, 20 years younger than the SBDC program. In 1989, Congress did a study saying, we're seeing all these women that are entering the workforce. Why are they not starting businesses at the same rate? What is the delay? Why are we not seeing this growth in female entrepreneurship? And that legislation that came from that study did two major things. One, it removed the barrier that women need a male relative to co-sign their business loan. So in 1989, I still needed a husband, uncle, son to say that I could start my own business. And then it started the Women's Business Center grant program to fund centers like ours around the country. So flash forward a number of years, it was very popular. Congress did make it permanent reoccurring funds. And that is the time in 2007 that Florida Tech applied for a grant. So Florida Tech actually receives the SBA grant to host a Women's Business Center program. And I'm on the national board of the Association of Women's Business Centers. There's 135 WBCs around the country. We have 4 in Florida, Tampa, Jacksonville, Delray Beach, and then we're here on the Space Coast. And we literally help tens of thousands of women launch and grow their businesses every year across the diverse industries. And we're in all 50 states plus Puerto Rico. So we've got a wide network of support to help entrepreneurs. I don't like to take credit for the growth in female entrepreneurship, but since that HR 50/50 passed in 1989, the trajectory of women-owned businesses has, gone up by like 3,000% in the United States. So let's call it a correlation at this point.
Okay.
That we can take a little bit at it.
Yeah, that's good. Hey, I'll go for that for sure. And one of the things I've learned in this role for the last couple of years at the corridor, and you described it already, as you look at the numbers it's dismal when we talk about, women entrepreneurs and the creativity that they can bring. So talk our audience through, the barriers that are still out there, some of the barriers perhaps that you've already described one barrier that you were able to remove, and that is having a male sign the form. So barriers maybe that have been removed, and then those things that are in your sights to continue to accelerate women and their desire to be in this entrepreneurial world.
Okay, so I'm going to start with saying the number one thing is always mentorship. It is something that you don't realize plays such a pivotal role in growing into your career, is seeing someone else who's already there, or having people that are encouraging you to think and do more and do farther. And every year, Lean In and McKinsey do a study called Women in the Workplace. And they have found that even today, 62% of C-suite executives in America are still white men. And what that means is we don't have a lot of people in senior leadership within the business community that look like not just women, but even our ethnic and racial minorities throughout the country. They're just not predominantly seen there. So when we talk about mentorship and the importance of DEI, as so many corporations are thinking of now, it really is saying that we need to be intentional, because human nature in and of itself does not lend to people saying, let me bring in people who are different than me. Usually the natural human relation is, I'm going to connect with people who I feel that connection, that I feel similar with. So we have to be intentional if we want to change those numbers. And we want to change those numbers because, quite frankly, women, and especially minority women, are exploding in the education fields. We are going to have a place very soon. Women already hold a higher number of higher degrees than men in the country. We are out graduating men at almost every level. 70% of valedictorians from high school last year were girls. The workplace is going to want the female worker because they have been working so hard to expand their success there. So mentorship. So a lot of what we do talks about connecting women with other women, but with men that are supportive to help them envision themselves either moving into that leadership position within an existing business, or for those who are entrepreneurs of growing their business bigger. They're not used to seeing a woman-owned business grow to that next level to really scale. And so we try to help surround them with the support. The second thing that I think is really important to talk about is work systems. I'm working on my doctorate here at Florida Tech, and a big focus that I pay attention to are things like paid family leave. What do we have set up as a society and an institution that make it harder for women either to stay in the workforce or are impacting the ways that they interact in the workforce? And so my dissertation and where my research is focused right now is looking at, we are celebrating this growth of female entrepreneurship, which I am fully invested in. But at the same time that we passed FMLA in 1994, all of the other OECD countries committed to and have since instituted paid family leave policies. The United States is now the only country without a formalized paid family leave. And that's for men and women, for sickness as well as childbirth, for caring for your parents as well as caring for young children. But the impact that it has had on our labor force, our rates of female entrepreneurship, we are an outlier compared to those other developed countries. So it's important that we think about, as a nation, our work systems. And if we have the ability that we're educating and we're preparing women to come into the workforce in greater numbers, what are we going to do to modify our work systems to make sure they can stay there? And then the third thing, as you mentioned, is the funding. And we connected over SBIR, and I think it's important still to note that there's an awareness that women receive less in terms of funding. SBIR grants, I think women are less than 13 or 14%, and that's remained static for years since they were tracking it in 2013. And we're really working to try to change that mindset to get women to think about it's the largest funding opportunity and the most, in my mind, makes sense for wonderful, startup things, because it's not taking equity, it's really encouraging you to be innovative. And they're not taking advantage of it. We know there's women out there and women-owned businesses that could be. So how do we encourage them to take advantage of those funding? And then access to venture. Women right now still receive less than 3% of venture funding. That's understandable. Women-owned businesses tend not to scale. This is my fun fact. I'm kind of on a roll here, but I'm just going to keep going. There's 13.1 million women-owned businesses in America. Only about 1.1 million of them have employees. The vast majority of women-owned businesses, over 12 million, are solopreneurs. And that ties back to that first 2 points that I said of why are women feeling like taking on risk of being a solopreneur is worth it, that they are not finding success within our existing work systems, and that taking on that risk as a solopreneur entrepreneurship is more efficient for them.
Yeah. So this is great. And here a couple of things that resonate with me in what you just said. And I was back in my Navy days. One of the groups I joined in this big systems command was the Women's Advisory Group. And I think I got looked at a little strange, like, why would you do that? I said, because I want to learn. And I think, so when you brought up the fact that it just isn't, it's women and men, and that learning between, understanding the differences, understanding the barriers. And I will tell you a paid political announcement for the corridor, and that is that our focus on underestimated communities, on women entrepreneurs, we are blessed with taxpayer dollars. That's how we're funded through the state. And what I don't want to do in the corridor is just pile on stuff that's already working. I want to go
Right.
after, and we're, with your help, this is one of the things that we're doing is going after those things that that can mean a difference. You were going to say something, I think.
Well, I think it's a mindset change that our whole culture and economy is going through right now in terms of what do we value, and how do we place different value on things. And the pandemic opened up in a big way our appreciation for the most intimate and necessary things in life, and those relational opportunities. And while capitalism will always be a profit driven and a growth oriented in mindset, there is a place for us to recognize what I call the lifestyle businesses, the people who find financial security and stability and that contribute a great deal to their local ecosystem, their local economy, and they're not necessarily thinking of operating on that scale. And I always like to say they're not thinking yet, because maybe someday they will. But a lot of the entrepreneurs, the vast majority of small businesses in the United States, I would say, fall into that, where they're thinking local economy, local regionally. They give back to the local schools and the local nonprofits. And when they're creating jobs, whether it's 5 or 500, they're feeding into these more local systems. And we need to value that more, because if investors and programs are only rewarding people who can bring in 2,000 jobs and, you know, have the potential for a 10x return, I'm sorry, but you're going to make a lot more unsafe bets than I will betting on my clients, because they're going to be in business for 20 years. They're going to be longevity, and you can throw money at, a dozen startups and be lucky if any of them is here in 3 years. So I'm all for the small business and the stability that it brings to our economic situation.
Yeah, and I think, and the thought occurred to me. I want to read your dissertation when you're done, because I think that's fascinating. As a lifelong learner myself, I think what you're diving into is something that's absolutely critical for understanding, for people to understand that piece. The other thing that, and you described it, and I was going to ask you about this, the pandemic and how you saw it. Certainly the idea of resilience.
Mm-hmm.
Whether I've changed my own definition of technology, because I learned that technology, if you say, okay, we're the high tech corridor, that can be somewhat exclusionary. That can,
Mm-hmm.
because people will say, hey, I'm not a high tech business. I remember a discussion early on with a lady who started what amounted to be a 3-state cleaning business. And she had to develop her own technology computer system for paying. And I said, oh, it would have been great, if we think about businesses and combining it shouldn't be lifestyle or growth.
Mm-hmm.
It should be and.
Yeah.
And so as you describe that, I think that's hugely important. You give us a chance to highlight for us maybe some success stories.
Sure. So I'll bring up a woman who's a member of our board now. Wendy Romeo is CEO of Alluvionic. And she came to us with a great deal of experience and in her background, but kind of saying, I think I can leverage and take this on and do this better. She was someone that I don't want to say was feeling that I don't want to speak out of turn, that she was feeling that C-suite pressure to leave, but I think she definitely had that call of, I could do this better, but I'm not getting the chance. So let's see what happens. But her company, they went through our program that we call Ignite 360 Mentoring, where we really help work on a solid, what we call outcomes driven. So we identify what did her business need at the time to scale and grow. She's in government contracting. She provides a lot of training then for other organizations that want to get into government contracting, because they've built on their success. And that was a turning point for her organization, not just working with the government directly, but helping others, becoming that service organization that is helping others be successful in their efforts to work with the federal government, because she had proven herself so good at it. And once we pivoted and her business had that point, it's really taken off. And her team does amazing work. She now, rather than a client, she's now on our board and gives back and is our biggest cheerleader. But that's a situation where you have women who have all of the right pieces and the motivation and the support, and it's just getting with them at the right time to make sure they stick with it and they see the added opportunity, and we help get them to that level. So she's a really exciting story that we point to a lot. Someone that has always been involved with us more from a leadership position, but that's been in our network, is Carol Craig. And I'm not sure if you've met her and heard commercial.
Navy.
She's celebrity in these
Yeah.
parts. But Carol and her husband were both naval aviators. She was a pilot as well. And I don't recall what brought them here. I would assume Patrick Air Force Base. But I think I recall them saying that it was the schools, that maybe after they were separating, that maybe they had stationed here at one point, but they moved back. And she started a government contracting and aerospace engineering firm. And it grew tremendously, and they went through the 8A program, and they were able to leverage all of the resources that the SBA likes to offer to help woman-owned, veteran-owned, businesses succeed. But what was interesting is after, let's call it 20 years of Craig Technologies being successful, she had an idea for a commercial satellite company. And Carol, even though she had this proven track record of successful business management, was having a not great experience in the venture world. And after a couple of very insulting meetings, as we'll say, she just said, I'm going to do this myself. I'm going to find a way to do this myself. And in less than a year, she took that company public on NASDAQ. She is the first woman-owned space company that has gone public. And now Sidus Space is launching. They're partnering with other companies as well, and then they're launching their satellites up on some of the commercial vehicles. And she's having tremendous success in that. And it is a story that she shares much better than I. And I would encourage people to Google her and see, where she's spoken. But her having a support network and having the confidence to know you're wrong, I can do this, we can do this, and walking away and not having that deterred, because that's hard. It's hard for any entrepreneur, but it's hard for women when you might be the only woman presenting or, in the room, and then you have a whole bunch of people telling So I like to think that she has enough swagger on her own, but I think she had built up a network over the years of support, and weVENTURE had been there encouraging her every step of the way, that she dreamed big and then she went for it, and she's doing it. And I love that.
Yeah, I got a chance to meet Carol at ITSIC, the giant conference every year in Orlando, and learned that she had been in a P3 community, so probably Jacksonville is where she was, and it was fascinating, because honestly, when I left sort of shaking my head going, I don't think I'd ever do that. I don't think I'd have the courage that she had to be able to go do it. And that's where I think organizations like yours and others, and I'll go back to what you said at the very beginning, which I think is key, and that is people need to see themselves in this. And I'm the first to admit that naval aviation has been in basically a white guy world. And so whatever I can do now in this journey in my life to be able to not just sit back and let, serendipity take its course, but really to be, and again, words you used at the very beginning, sort of intentional about things. I also think you're on the mark when you talk about systems, and, not all of us are systems thinkers.
So when organizations like ours are able to track, even if it is a small percentage of the resources are going to women-owned businesses, if we show that they are successful, that, hey, this is our track record here, and that's a lot of what we say in the venture community, of the women-owned businesses that received venture in the United States, they've outperformed their male colleagues over the last decade. So it's almost that sound investment, but it's changing, again, how we value, what we look at as businesses. And then as a small business advocate, recognizing that our how things were and how things will be will never be the same. We're always on a cycle of change and growth and momentum. And you either move with it and predict where it's going, or you really do get left behind. So it's impossible to look at the statistics of the growth of women's participation in the labor force, our education rates, and not realize that we need to be going where our economy is headed and not looking backwards to where it had been.
Yeah, and that's what excites me about, and I'll be parochial about the state of Florida. I always felt like, at least when I first thought about, hey, where do my wife and I and where do our kids want to, we were up in Maryland at the time, and it is a very yes and very collaborative, very, it's almost like because people aren't from around here, so you don't have a pre-made click that you have to break into necessarily. I can look at the corridor and go, wow, check out the Space Coast. Check out what they're doing and how that's changing over time, and then trying to go to where that's going to head. Talk to me a little. You'd mentioned community. One of the things that I guess I've learned over the last couple of years is the importance of community. We talk about in the quarter about community-driven innovation, and it's working with communities, not for them, not doing things to them, but really working with. So when you talk about community, describe that for me a little bit when you think about the community piece.
So for us, primarily, I'd say prior to the pandemic, our community really was just Brevard, and that we really were in our lane, and we were a smaller center. Before the pandemic, I think our center only helped about 250, 300 clients a year. I came on board in 2020, just before the pandemic. The demand for small business support has exploded, as you can imagine. And so during the pandemic, the SBA and myself were really passionate about making sure we served all of our region, which includes the Treasure Coast. We're really the Space and Treasure Coast, so Indian River, St. Lucie, down to Martin County. Thanks to funding from the CARES Act, we had the capacity then. We were able to staff up and help those. But I don't ever want to go back. And now we have the client demand that's requiring, they're coming in from all over. So when I think of community right now for weVENTURE, I think of building a support network for women that's both a regional focus, that's that larger, bigger picture. But I have found so much success partnering with local community organizations that are already in Lincoln Park, Main Street, in the historically African-American parts of Fort Pierce, working with the city of Cocoa to serve their Cocoa Village area. We partner with the Palm Bay Hispanic Center now to bring our services to individuals who take advantage of what they offer. So when I think of community, I'm able to serve a bigger region through partnerships with existing community organizations that really help us target and be intentional about finding those who don't know what services are out there to help them. Like, we have to go to them. They're not coming and seeking us out, and we go and find them and try to offer our services and help. So community has taken on a big shift and change for our center, but I think it's for the better. I think we're being more intentional, and I think that the outcomes that we will see, we're still going to have folks who want to start a business that will Google around. They will always come and find us. But by us being more proactive in our outreach, I think we're really going to see a lot more interesting organic support for, as you said, those underestimated communities that I think really have a lot to offer that we want to help build up.
Yeah, and I think, what you said I resonate with, because I've heard it before, and that is the idea of sometimes there are so many supporting arms that young entrepreneurs aren't quite sure where to go. Mm-hmm. And it becomes, you have to go to where they are. And then you have to, again, not overpromise. You're not describing yourself as the one-stop shop, because there isn't that in this world. And so that's what, again, the way you're approaching weVENTURE and the businesses you help. I also am thinking about, the comment you made, and we work with a lot of economic development organizations, and one of the things I learned was that and it is important to bring in businesses into the state. I've also learned and the numbers bear this out from Kaufman and everything else. It's these smaller companies who are growing here, who start here and grow here and stay here. It doesn't have to be 100. It doesn't have to be 50. It can be 5. And just that really is, I think sometimes it's not well, people don't see it. They don't see it. Well, that's just, a mom and pop shop or things like that. But yeah, think about what that's doing.
And until they go, I'll tell you the story. We have, I think they're as wide into Central Florida, but you ever go to Petty's Meat Market?
Yep.
Over there. So for whatever reason, they're closing our local Petty's. So here in Melbourne. And I'm telling you, you would think the heart has been ripped out of Melbourne right now. I mean, everyone is just like, what do you mean Petty's is going? But they're an institution, right? And there's just not a lot of local deli markets like that you can go to anymore. And that's where everybody would go when you have this special date and you want a nice steak to make for someone, like that's where you go, you get your wine. And small businesses like that they told me they have like 50 employees here locally. And they're helping place them. They have other Petty's markets around and they're offering them jobs elsewhere. And I still don't know why they're doing it. But if you ever doubt the impact that you have in a community and you have that It's a Wonderful Life moment where you don't think you matter, I really think that a business owner should just do that. We're struggling right now. Come out and help me. And the community would rally. And they did that during the pandemic when we had small businesses that struggled and restaurants that people adored struggled. Their community stepped up and they said, we'd love to do takeout. You make it available, we will order. And small businesses benefit from that local community.
The other thing that I'd be interested in your thoughts on this, and then we'll close it out here. You're heavily involved in education, just in what you're doing. You're getting your PhD. I've noticed that when we think about entrepreneurship, sometimes people say, yeah, I don't want to be an entrepreneur because I don't want to start a business. But there's a way of thinking as an entrepreneur that I think is really relevant to where our society is headed, the critical thinking piece, the empathy piece, all those things I think that we talk a lot about. I think there's an education piece in that. Care to share some insights on the education side of entrepreneurship with these businesses that you work with?
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of people who don't realize that they are entrepreneurs, that they get so far into doing what they love or what they do. And then they wake up one day and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm running a business, and that's usually when they call us because, okay, they didn't know how to do their balance sheet and their finances are off and they're a little underwater, but they just start doing something that they love. And I think that the business side, while Florida Tech might not like to hear, I can teach you Excel and QuickBooks, and we can get you up to speed on that pretty quickly. But the desire to overcome challenges, the desire to push through when things get hard and reinvent and try new things and pivot until you really market, the excellent customer service where so many businesses, that's where we see them grow and succeed, that they're doing something that they get a loyal following and people, and before they know it, it blows up. You can't teach some of those things. Some of those things just come from passion and the drive that the entrepreneurial type people have. And I think that there are a lot of people who surprise themselves that they think that entrepreneurship will be hard, and then they wind up loving it so much, and they were called to it and they were scared to do it and they were nervous. But once they get in it, they realize this was my person, that I was made for this. And yes, we can work on your operational organization and help you with the business end. If you don't have your MBA, we'll get you there. But what you have in your desire to innovate and to serve others is going to make you a successful business owner. That is a key ingredient.
Yeah, and that comes out in how you're conveying your passion for this, and I think it's awesome that our youngest daughter, when we moved here 2 years ago, junior in high school, and she started her own business. I said, "Gosh, it must be in the water or something like that." In fact, now she's a freshman, and she's having it's in thrift clothing and things like that. Now she's having her mom have to send that stuff out because she's still getting nibbles on it, even though she's trying to go to the school. So I think what you're doing is just phenomenal, and I hope the corridor continues to be a great partner with you in what you're doing. Kathryn, there's probably something I left off or a question I didn't ask that I should have as we close this out today. Any other thoughts that you'd like our perhaps bigger audience to know?
Since it's National Women's Small Business Month, I think that it is worth shouting out, celebrating, encouraging everyone to support women-owned small businesses that you know. I would love for them to refer them to weVENTURE, the Tampa Women's Business Center, whatever it is, let them know where there's support. But I think what our partnership that brought us together, that the corridor is doing, is so important because SBIR funding is across every federal department, and it's so much more than just high-tech computer hardware, right? And I think there are businesses in almost every sector of our economy that could qualify in some way, shape, or form. So I'm so appreciative to the chance to partner with you all to help educate our team and our staff more, that we can look at clients in a new way and leverage those opportunities for Florida, and to see more women-owned businesses benefit from those programs and hopefully continue to grow and give back to our local economy. But thank you for focusing on women in business this month. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And some good news in the coming weeks to follow with regard to SBIRs, which is, again, exciting for us to play a small part in this and to watch the success of the folks that go through your programs. Kathryn, it's been a huge pleasure. So thank you very much for taking the time. To the audience, thanks for dialing in and seeing what we're doing. I constantly get energized by the types of people that we have on here that get to share their story. So thank you again for taking the time. Have a great afternoon. Thanks, Kathryn.